So I mentioned earlier about how I'm going to be sharing about my 15 years of failures in the business world. And it's really not failures. It's more of like not being consistent, pivoting, changing directions, not sure what I want to do, being indecisive, having analysis paralysis, ruminating over all the negative things, dealing with rejection sensitivity, maybe, dealing with procrastination issues, only wanting to focus on tasks that I really like to do. There's a lot that's been going on in the last 15 years. And so I'm here to share with you that it's okay. Take a breath. If that's been you, trust me, it's so fun. So fun. When you finally figure out about how your brain works and you figure out like, oh, okay, I've actually been struggling with these things my whole life and didn't know it. There is definitely a time of grief that happens because you finally figure out like, oh, you're not weird, and oh, there's like millions of other people that actually deal with this and maybe they don't realize it either. And you don't want to be stuck with the stigma because people look down on you. Oh, you have ADHD, so that's a problem. No, it's not a problem. It's actually a superpower. We just have to learn how to manage it, how to use it, right? If you had the ability to fly and you don't know how to use it and you're swimming, like you're trying to swim and you're supposed to be flying, like, a duck's, anyways. So I'm here to say this. I'm not sure where you're at in your journey. Maybe you're just getting started, or maybe like me, you've been trying and spinning your wheels and figuring out, okay, this isn't working for me. Everybody's telling me to do these things. I can't keep track of them. I forget what I'm talking about 5 minutes after I say it, and how am I supposed to actually make sense of all of this? Well, that's what we're going to be going over today. So 15 things that I've learned in the last 15 years. Number one is that I end up jumping all over the place. If you're ADHD like me, you have 1,000,001 interests. And let me tell you, I've had plenty. From network marketing, which I tried multiple different companies, and that just, it didn't work. It didn't work because I had the wrong mentality. Not to say that it doesn't work, because it works and people actually make a lot of money in network marketing. And if you struggle with, coming up with your own thing or staying consistent, they have a vehicle to get you there. And it's actually really a great way to get the business training that you need, get the mindset training that you need, and have something to sell right off the bat that you don't have to create. So if you struggle with coming up with something, you're like, oh, I really want to get a business started, absolutely get started in network marketing. Let them be your support system. But make sure you find somebody that understands your ADHD and isn't going to push you away because you get overwhelmed and deal with all of the rejection and all of those things. You're really wanting to make sure you get somebody good. Second thing on my list is the fact that I have analysis paralysis real bad, and making decisions, having decision fatigue has been a big issue over the last several years. Now, over the last year is when I've really been focused on creating my own business and going out on my own and doing my own work and not being a part of any other business opportunity. Now, I have purchased some things that have, I've purchased many of different things that I could be selling, but I'm like, no, I really feel called to help this set group of people, and so that's what I'm doing. And it's been hard. Spinning my wheels because of the analysis paralysis has been major. So if that's you and you deal with the analysis paralysis, let me tell you, write all your decisions down that you need to make and weigh them all out, and maybe just so that way you don't forget about them, because that's one of the biggest things is, oh, what if I forget about this idea and I need to work on it right now because I have it all in my brain. Do a video, do a brain dump, talk to somebody, do an audio, start a podcast where you can brain dump all these ideas, right? But don't ever maybe post it anywhere. Getting these ideas out on the table have really helped me to figure out where my mindset's at, and also figure out what I need to focus on or what I want to focus on. I've focused on several things. I've enjoyed gardening for a time. I've enjoyed herbalism for a time. I love photography still. I do cake baking. I do homeschooling. I do educational things. I do ministry work. Like, I loved crafting. I love, ice skating. There are so many things, right, that I really do. And I'm like, man, I could go out and like make any one of these things a actual business. But then when it comes down to it, I start getting into that, well, how am I going to actually make that work? And how is that feasible? And I don't have any, anyways. So that brings me to my next point, which is that rejection sensitivity. I didn't realize it was a thing until just recently. And I didn't know that that's what I was dealing with. I'm like, oh, I've been told, oh, you're just depressed and you need to deal with your depression. And it's like, yes, there is some sense of depression there, but it's not really depression because it's more, it's deeper than that. And it's an ongoing thing that I struggle with throughout the day, every day. And if that's you dealing with, rejection issues, like I don't want to fail. There's a fear of failure. Well, let me tell you, do your first thing and actually fail at it. Do your first thing, check that box off, right? Get that box checked off and just do the thing. Once you see, oh, it's not that bad, or oh, those people really are just, I've had to talk myself out of that rejection multiple times. I've had people just ghost me. I've had people tell me, well, that's too expensive, when it was just that they weren't ready. They weren't ready to invest in themselves. And that has been the biggest piece of advice that I've taken that has helped me to come out of this. Oh, they're rejecting me. No, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting what they cannot do for themselves in this moment. And I have really come out of that. I was selling Cutco at one time. I sold over like $8,000 worth of Cutco in the summer, and that's a lot for a kid. I was, 17, whatever. It was before I was going to college, and it wasn't until the end where I started really worrying about the budget of everybody else. And I was worrying about, well, can they really afford it? Can they not? Instead of letting them tell me what they want to spend their money on, I was basically in my head, before I was already trying to offer them anything or sell them anything, I was already thinking like, oh, well, they don't make that much money, or oh, they're just doing me a favor by letting me do this appointment, or blah, 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 whatever, right? No, you've got to stop thinking about, oh, well, they're going to reject me before you actually get rejected. And so that even the top salespeople deal with rejection, right? Their rates are usually maybe 10%, maybe 20% close rate. If you get anything higher than that, wow, you are like phenomenal, right? But for the most part, most people get told no. And we have to let that happen and understand that it's not us that they're saying no to. They're actually saying no to themselves because they don't value themselves enough to invest in themselves. If you're dealing with things like that, or if it's a product or something and it's like, no, it's not you. It's either it's not the right time, and that's where you follow up with people, like follow up. The sale is in the follow up. I've heard that over and over from network marketing and all those other things. Which brings me to my next point. I have forgotten ideas that I've had, and I get really low self-esteem, and that low self-esteem is that next number on the point list. See, I already forgot how many points we have. It would be great if I wrote them down, right? But I don't do that. Anyway, so self-esteem has been the next point. I have struggled with self-esteem, low self-esteem, because I'm like, okay, I am different than everybody else, and what comes so easily for everybody else, I've had to struggle bust my way. I have had to finagle my way. I've had to network my way. I've had to build relationships and let them help. And I've had to build connections, but that's also taught me how to reach people. And I've talked to several now who are like, how are you getting all these people? How are you talking to all these people? How are you? I'm like, well, I don't know, because I don't see people as higher than me. I see people as all the same. Even though I have low self-esteem, instead of looking at everybody, I look at everybody equally. And that's really what you have to do, is to see yourself as not lower than everybody else, because that's what will help you come out of that self-esteem. Which brings us to the next point, which is confidence. And I think I'm on my 5th point now. I think we went through, yeah. So confidence goes with low self-esteem, but confidence is not built without going through the action. The action in taking the steps, which I was not willing to do that. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get rejected, right? So I'm like, I don't have the confidence to do this, right? Or I don't want to go out and put myself out there because I don't have the confidence. Okay, well, really, the confidence is built by going out and doing the action and saying what you're going to do. Your subconscious is always on. It's always working. It's always going. And when you tell yourself you're going to do something and then you don't do it, that's where you lack confidence, because your brain's like, okay, well, you can't even go and do this simple thing. Like maybe it's going to the gym, or maybe it's, I don't know, reading your Bible every day or whatever it is. If you don't go and do that thing, that's how you end up building low confidence, because you're not going to do the things you actually say you're going to do. When you start actually being a doer of your word and you say something and you go do it, that's what builds your confidence. So you have to actually go and do these things to make it happen. Which brings me to my next point, which is perfectionism. I struggle and have struggled with perfectionism my whole life, and I want it to be absolutely perfect, and then I stress out about all the little nitpicky, teeny tiny, nitty gritty details and get stuck in the weeds, and I'm like, oh, this is too much, I can't do this. Because I want it perfect, and I want people to think highly of me, and I want people to like what I'm doing, and I want people, like basically people pleasing, right? Like we want to people please. That's like a big ADHD thing, and so I've struggled with that too. But perfectionism is our next point, because you can't have anything be perfect. The only one that's perfect is God, and we're not God, so we got to let that go. Like, get things done, just get them done messy, and that's going to be your best next step, is to just go and do it. It's not going to be perfect the first time, and that's okay. Nobody's expecting it to be perfect. Even though we're expecting it to be perfect, we have to understand that the people who we are trying to reach, they're going to love us for us. They're going to love us for our personality. They're going to love you because you are giving them that encouragement. You're inspiring them to go out and do the thing, or you're showing them ways that they have never thought of, right? Which brings me to my next point, which I think that's 7. So 8. You were meant for more. And it wasn't until I realized that I've always realized, like, I've been meant for more, but what that more is, I'm like, I can't figure this out. I don't know what more I'm supposed to be doing. I'm interested in all these different things, and how do I focus on just one thing when I have 1,000,001 things that I enjoy to do? And it wasn't until I'm like, okay, I have to let God order my steps. I have to let God be the leader of my life. I have to put faith that He is going to give me the revelation that I need to go out and do this thing, even though maybe, just maybe, I don't really know what that is going to be. I have all these interests, I like all these things, but what I'm doing now is not at all what was on my radar 15 years ago. When I was starting all this, I was not even thinking about this. I really want to encourage people. I really want to tell people that they are absolutely capable of doing the things. They are absolutely able to do the actions and stay true to themselves and go out and make an impact. And so that's what I'm focused on. It's not been easy. It's been very challenging. I have had to pivot many times, and it's hard for me to let those things go, which brings me to my next point. So I think we're at 9. The next point is that you can't be focused on 1,000,000 things at once and think you're going to succeed at all of them. Eventually, yeah, there's people that have, 15, 17, 47 different businesses that they've started. They don't really tell you what happens to those businesses until maybe you ask them in person. But those bigwigs, those, very successful entrepreneurs, they've tried a bunch of different things, but they didn't do all those things at once. So maybe you have 3 different things you want to be working on, or maybe you have 15 different ideas. Put all the ideas down, flesh them all out, write an outline, talk to ChatGPT, and have it help you figure out what you need to do. Because you can't do everything at once. And that took me a really long time to figure out. I was so focused on my interior design degree, and I went out and I got that thing, but I was so worried about all the testing, and so I never went and did my tests. And I've ruminated over that, felt guilty over that, felt ashamed because I wasn't brave enough to go and just do the thing because I have test anxiety. Oh my gosh, right? And it takes me a longer time to comprehend things, and it's much harder for me to get things to work. And I'm like, I see all my friends, they're all seniors in the design world and doing all this stuff, and I'm still at ground zero, and I can't get myself, up and working because, oh my goodness, I was trying to focus on 50,000,001 things. because of my ADHD. And until I accepted that and like, okay, it doesn't mean that I have to pigeonhole myself into this one thing, which brings me to my next point. What you do does not define you. And this I'm still struggling on, and I've struggled with that because I'm like, okay, I am a mom, and I'm a wife, and I'm a designer, and I'm a photographer, and I'm a cake baker, and I'm all these things, right? But those things don't actually define me. God defines me, and He says who I am, and it's not until you recognize that it's God who says who you are that you can appreciate who He's made you to be. And that is separate from all the things that you do. It's not what you do that defines you. You have to let those things that you like, those interests that you have, be a part of you, be a part of, what you do, but it doesn't actually say, oh, well, you are this, right? Like, okay, so we have ADHD, or maybe we struggle with OCD, but that doesn't have to define who I am. I have to figure out how to work around it. I have to figure out how my brain works differently so I can work with it, but that doesn't mean that it's the only thing that I am ever going to be, and thus I'm not going to be successful. We have to say, okay, well, who am I in God's eyes? Well, I'm a daughter of the King, and that means that I need to act like a queen, and I need to act like, I hold my head up high because I have all this hope, I have all this faith, and we have to actually let that happen. And so that brings me to my next point, which we're at point 11, which is the fact that it's in God's timing. And it took me a long time to figure this out because I wanted things to happen in my time. I wanted things to happen when I wanted them to happen. And yes, it's so important to set goals. Yes, it's so important to have a plan for your future and know where you're wanting to go. But let me tell you, it's not ever going to work out the way that you think it's going to work out. It's not ever going to work out in the timing that you think it's going to work out. I had my whole life planned out, and I was going to be this designer on HGTV, and who knows, that might still happen, right? I don't know. Maybe that's something that God has in store for me. That's something that I really enjoy. But that's not what happened. I wanted to be a Disney on Ice figure skater, but I knew there were so many things that were holding me back from that, and it was myself. But it was in God's timing. It's in God's timing that things happen. Maybe you're just starting out, or maybe you're like me and you've been spinning your wheels for so long, but it's because you haven't focused. It's because you haven't let God really own your plans. You haven't put those plans out before and said, okay, God, move my feet, move my steps. Let me have this faith. Which brings me to my next point, which is point 12. And that is the fact that when you have all of these plans and you make all these goals, I've made the vision boards, okay? I've done the goal setting and it hasn't worked for me. Don't let discouragement of your plans not happening in the way that you want them to happen stop you from continuing to move forward. Yes, put the vision out there. Yes, focus on the things that you need to focus on. Yes, make sure that you have that. What is my 90-day plan? What is my 100-day plan? What is my 5-year goals? What do I want? What are my goals for my family? What are my goals for my business? All these things are absolutely important and helps you to gain clarity on how you're going to achieve those things and gives you an outline of what you're going to do to achieve the things. But don't let it discourage you if it doesn't happen in the 5 years, or if it doesn't happen in the 90 days, and maybe it takes 2 years for you to get that, or maybe it takes you 15 years to get going, right? God's timing is perfect, and we have to understand that things come in seasons. And it wasn't until I realized that I started to see a lot of clarity, which brings me to my next point, which is there is seasons, and you work in seasons. There's a season of life, and there's a season of business, there's a season of family time, and maybe right now is just not your season, and that's okay. It's okay for it to not be your season. Figure out what season it is that you're actually in and work with it. Maybe it's your planning season and not your action season. Maybe the season that you're in is for you to get clarity, or maybe it's your season to focus on your family and figure out what their needs are, so that way you can best not only serve them, but you can figure out how to work around what their needs are, so you can go out and do the business that you've wanted to do. Which brings me to my next point, and that is the fact that you absolutely cannot give up. Giving up and letting the enemy win is what he wants for you. He wants you to stay stuck. He wants you to not be able to move forward. He wants you to be in the place of depression. He wants you to be in the hopelessness place. And we have to learn how he works, because when we understand that we have to put on that full armor of God, we have to get our mind in the right spot. We have to get our thoughts in the right spot. You know, when God said in his word about having the mind of Christ, what does that actually mean? How do we actually do that, right? And so that is where you cannot give up. If there's anything that I've learned over these last 15 years of, and it's not to say that I haven't had successes, right? Like, I've had successes. They might have been little successes here and there. I did achieve a lot. I've achieved, getting a degree. I've achieved having, the dream, the jobs that I wanted, and the dream job that was something that I thought that I needed, but and then having to let that go and let all the other things pass me, it's been a challenge. But beyond all of that, the ADHD superpower that we have is that we don't give up, and we're super determined, and we keep figuring out ways, and we keep finding out how to overcome. And so, which brings me to my next point of the fact that I think we're at 14. Overcoming overwhelm has been a challenge, and being overwhelmed with all the different tasks, I end up thinking 10 steps ahead, which makes getting started really hard, because I'm thinking, okay, but I have to do this before I can actually attain the thing. And so that stops me in my tracks, instead of thinking, okay, let me focus on this moment of getting this one thing nailed down, and then I'll get this all nailed down, and then I'll move on to the next step. And overcoming that overwhelm really helps you to see, like, oh, okay, well, I can do this. I can make that happen. Here's how I'm going to do that. Let me make a plan for that. Let me make micro steps. And this is where you have to really focus on your little teeny tiny wins, which brings me to my last point. What I've learned over the last 15 years of all of this is to celebrate your wins, no matter how small they are. I struggle with celebrating my wins. I've struggled with celebrating my wins and seeing them as like insignificant or not important or not really anything worth celebrating. And that has also kept me stuck, because I'm like, well, I've not really achieved anything. I've not really gotten anywhere. I've not really done anything that's worth celebrating. So like, why even bother? Why bother moving forward? Who's going to listen to me? Who's going to care what I've done? I've actually done quite a lot over these last 15 years that I've seen as significant, and I'm here to tell you that that is what is going to keep you stuck, is thinking that what you've done doesn't matter and isn't going to make a difference, isn't making an impact. It absolutely is making an impact. I was running a youth group that was like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts at 17 years old. I graduated with an associate's degree in high school, and I'm like, ugh, whatever. Like, to me, these are all insignificant things, but most people just go to high school and do high school. And I graduated with a college degree in high school so I could transfer to a university. And then, graduating from that, and I got my own internships, and I did all these things. And then, it took me 4 years to finally get my dream job, but I always had a job. And so, and I was able to network my way to other jobs. And so, but I looked down on that. And so coming home, and then, oh, well, I'm not really very successful with homeschooling, and we haven't really done very much, and it's, maybe not been that. No, it's been actually very successful. We created a whole homeschool community. We created a thriving co-op. We created all these programs. I'm an owner, nonprofit founder. I've written to anthology books and been a part of that. The second one's coming out this month. And so it's like all these little things you have to celebrate. And that's not even talking about like, you know, your kids or the family stuff that you've been able to accomplish, or like I bought our first house. I personally bought our first house because my husband didn't have a job and we couldn't really use any of his stuff. So I single-handedly bought our first house and like didn't think about that either, like until now, where I'm like, oh, okay, that's actually quite a big win. Like I was able to do that. That's huge, right? All the little things that you've done over your life has some significance. You know, I've passed them all and thought, oh, they're not really important. They don't really matter, but they absolutely do matter. And so I'm here to tell you from all these things, right? Watch how you ruminate, okay? Watch how your analysis paralysis goes into play. Watch how your rejection, just sensitivity, you know, can interfere with what you're doing. Watch your perfectionism. Make sure you're just getting things done and not worried about them being perfect, and focus on the progress that you're making. You know, pay attention to that confidence that you have and go out and do the action before you have the confidence to do it. Get the self-esteem from the people around you that are cheering you on, and don't worry about looking at everybody else, right? Don't take the time to compare yourself. Put your face in and focus, right? You have so much ability to create, so much, right? And when we're stuck in those moments where we're not focused on what God wants us to do, when we're not seeing who we are in His eyes, when we're not doing the things that we know we need to do, and we're getting stuck and just in those depressive modes, you're not going to succeed because the devil wants to keep you stuck. So keep those things in the top of your mind. I hope this has been helpful and encouraging to you, and definitely if you get a chance, check out the books. I think I'll have those in the links below, and if you subscribe this to somebody else that you know would benefit, I'd really like to be more of an impact, just like you can be an impact.